The moonlit skies of Eternia shimmered like a jewel on a crown. Beneath its serene glow, the kingdom of Eternia thrived, protected by the legendary Castle Grayskull and its unwavering champion, He-Man. For decades, He-Man had vanquished every threat that dared to invade his homeland, from Skeletor's relentless schemes to monstrous armies forged in the dark corners of the universe. But tonight, a new menace approached, one that defied the boundaries of reason. A deafening crack tore through the air as a swirling vortex of light opened above the Whispering Woods. The portal spewed flames and smoke, scorching the trees below. From the churning chaos, a figure emerged, clad in black leather and wielding a massive hook-tipped chain. His crimson eyes glinted with malice, and a maniacal grin spread across his face. The infamous Xanian bounty hunter Lobo had arrived. "Eternia, huh?" Lobo muttered, surveying the unfamiliar terrain. "Let's see what makes this rock worth my time." His voice carried an undertone of cruelty. Lobo was on a mission, a contract issued by a mysterious benefactor offering a bounty large enough to make even the main man salivate. His target? Castle Grayskull and its secrets. Meanwhile, He-Man stood atop the battlements of Castle Grayskull, alerted by the mystical sorcery of the sorceress herself. Her voice echoed in his mind. "He-Man, a great threat approaches. This intruder seeks to desecrate the heart of Eternia. You must stop him." Drawing the sword of power from his back, He-Man felt the familiar surge of energy coursing through his veins. His transformation was complete, no longer Prince Adam, but Eternia's strongest warrior. "By the power of Grayskull," he bellowed, his voice carrying authority and determination. He-Man found Lobo near the edge of the Whispering Woods, where the Xanian was causing chaos, tearing apart ancient oaks and hurling boulders just for fun. As He-Man approached, Lobo's eyes locked onto him, and his grin widened. "Well, if it ain't the local pretty boy," Lobo sneered. "You must be the welcome committee. Too bad you ain't my type." He-Man tightened his grip on his sword. "Leave Eternia now, stranger, and no harm will come to you. But if you insist on violence, you'll find I'm more than ready." Lobo burst into laughter, a guttural sound that echoed through the forest. "Violence? Pal, that's my middle name." With a flick of his wrist, his chain lashed out, aiming to ensnare He-Man. But He-Man was quicker. Sidestepping the attack, he swung his sword, severing the chain in midair. Sparks flew, and Lobo's grin faltered for a moment before being replaced by a look of wild excitement. "Now we're talking!" Lobo roared, charging at He-Man with unrelenting force. The two clashed with the fury of titans. Lobo's brute strength was matched blow for blow by He-Man's disciplined power. The Xanian's fists collided with He-Man's shield, creating shockwaves that rattled the trees. He-Man countered with swift strikes of his sword, each one forcing Lobo to step back. "I've faced being stronger than you," He-Man said, his voice steady despite the intensity of the battle. "Oh yeah?" Lobo shot back, wiping blood from his lip. "Bet they didn't have my stamina." He-Man realized quickly that Lobo wasn't just strong, he was relentless. The bounty hunter seemed to thrive on the chaos, his attacks growing fiercer with each failed attempt. But He-Man was no ordinary warrior. Summoning the power of Grayskull, he unleashed a devastating blow, sending Lobo flying into a nearby boulder, shattering it to pieces. For a moment, there was silence. Then, from the rubble, Lobo emerged laughing. "Now that's more like it," he said, his body regenerating before He-Man's eyes. "You're gonna have to do better than that, Blondie." The battle raged on, their clash shaking the very foundations of Eternia. As the night wore on, He-Man began to realize that brute strength alone wouldn't be enough to stop Lobo. He needed a plan, a way to outwit the indomitable Xanian. Far above the battlefield, the sorceress watched, her face etched with concern. "He-Man," she whispered, her voice reaching him through the power of Grayskull. "Lobo is not of this world. His resilience is unnatural. You must draw upon the wisdom of Grayskull to defeat him." He-Man nodded, her words giving him clarity. As Lobo charged once more, He-Man sidestepped and delivered a calculated strike to the ground, creating a fissure that swallowed Lobo whole. The Zarnian clawed his way out moments later, but He-Man was ready. Channeling the power of Grayskull, he summoned an ancient spell, encasing Lobo in a field of mystical energy. The Zarnian thrashed and cursed, but the spell held firm. "This isn't over," Lobo roared, his voice muffled by the magical barrier. "It is for now," He-Man replied. "Leave Eternia and never return." As He-Man prepared to send Lobo back through the portal from whence he came, Lobo's roars reverberated across the valley as he broke free from He-Man's mystical containment spell. His strength and ferocity seemed boundless, a trait that had earned him a reputation as the galaxy's most unstoppable bounty hunter. But He-Man, Protector of Eternia, would not falter. "Nice trick," Lobo sneered, cracking his neck as he squared off with He-Man once more. "But I ain't leaving until I get what I came for." "And you won't get it," He-Man replied firmly, the sword of power glinting in the moonlight. "Eternia's secrets are not for the likes of you." With an earth-shattering roar, Lobo charged, swinging his chain like a whirlwind. The Zarnian's relentless aggression threatened to overwhelm even He-Man's legendary defenses. Sparks flew as the chain clashed against the sword of power, the impact sending shockwaves rippling through the ground. But He-Man stood his ground. With every swing of Lobo's chain, He-Man countered with a precision strike, driving the bounty hunter back step by step. Lobo's attacks were wild and chaotic, but He-Man's movements were controlled, guided by years of battle and the wisdom of Grayskull. "I've faced the Horde, Skeletor, and even the gods themselves," He-Man said, his voice steady despite the storm of violence around him. "You are powerful, Lobo, but your greed blinds you." "Blah, blah, blah," Lobo spat, lunging forward. "You talk too much, pretty boy." With a burst of speed, Lobo slammed into He-Man, sending both warriors crashing into a nearby mountainside. The impact carved a massive crater, dust and debris filling the air. For a moment, all was still. Then from the rubble, the two warriors emerged, their eyes locked in a fierce glare. He-Man wiped blood from his brow, his grip on the sword of power tightening. Lobo grinned, his teeth bared like a wild animal. "You're tough, I'll give you that," Lobo said. "But tough ain't enough to beat me." He-Man didn't respond with words. Instead, he raised the sword of power high above his head, the blade glowing with a golden light that illuminated the battlefield. "By the power of Grayskull," he cried, the words echoing across Eternia. The ground trembled as the sword of power unleashed a blinding surge of energy, engulfing He-Man in an aura of raw strength. Lobo shielded his eyes from the light, but it was too late. He-Man closed the distance in an instant, his blade striking with the force of a thunderbolt. The blow sent Lobo hurtling through the air, his indestructible body smashing through rock and steel. He crashed into the ground with enough force to create a massive crater, dust and smoke rising like a veil over the battlefield. When the dust settled, Lobo lay motionless, his body battered and bruised. For the first time in his long, violent career, the main man had been defeated. He-Man stood over him, his chest heaving with exertion. The sword of power hummed with residual energy, its light fading as He-Man lowered it. "Your strength is great, Lobo," He-Man said, his tone firm yet respectful. "But the power of Grayskull is greater. Leave Eternia now and never return." Lobo groaned, pushing himself to his knees. His grin had faded, replaced by a look of begrudging respect. "You got guts, Blondie," he muttered, spitting blood onto the ground. "I'll give you that, but don't think this is over." Without another word, Lobo activated a small device on his wrist. A portal opened behind him, swirling with the same chaotic energy that had brought him to Eternia. He glanced at He-Man one last time, his crimson eyes gleaming. "Next time you won't be so lucky," Lobo said before stepping through the portal. The vortex closed, and silence returned to Eternia. He-Man stood alone, the sword of power in hand, a testament to his unyielding strength and resolve. The battle was over, and the Protector of Eternia had once again proven that no force, no matter how fearsome, could overcome the power of Grayskull.